In the Old West, among desert landscapes and dusty trails, life was a picture of adventure and challenge. Beyond the stereotype of brave cowboys and high-noon duels, there was a less glamorous side to daily life: hygiene. Imagining the sanitary routine of that time takes you back to an era where baths were rare, and living conditions were far from modern comforts. In cramped houses without proper bathrooms, smell and dirt were constant companions. Diseases spread easily, and life in general was tough. In beds often made of straw and hay, sewing squirrels, or lice as we know them, were frequent visitors, adding yet another challenge to the already harsh reality of pioneers in the American West. During the height of the Old West, it wasn't uncommon for beds to be made from simple materials like straw and hay. While practical, this choice had its downsides. One of them was how rarely the sheets were washed, which often led to infestations of lice and other bugs. Interestingly, lice were humorously referred to as sewing squirrels. Aside from lice, life at that time was also plagued by flies that fed on exposed food and human waste, and mosquitoes that swarmed into poorly sealed homes. This constant exposure to insects made hygiene conditions pretty poor. Rose Pender, who visited the West between 1883 and 1888, left a detailed account of these conditions. In her memoirs, she describes one particularly tough night when she was constantly bothered by a swarm of insects, leading to little or no sleep. Back in the Old West, most houses didn't have screens on the windows, which let bugs and pests fly freely between homes and outhouses, bringing along whatever they picked up along the way. Outhouses, essential in daily frontier life, were often known for their strong smells and the constant presence of insects. While some people chose to relieve themselves in the woods, most outhouses were built close to homes and farms to make them easy to access and for safety. Building these outhouses started with digging a hole, over which a simple wooden structure was set up. Once the hole filled up, a cover was placed over it, and the structure was moved to a new hole, usually dug nearby. In the outhouses of the Old West, where strong odors were common, people tried to mask the smell using lime or lemon. These cramped spaces were also shared with all kinds of pests, especially flies and the dreaded black widow spiders, which were a constant threat to anyone brave enough to use them. Back then, toilet paper as we know it today didn't exist, so people had to get creative with things like leaves, corn cobs, and even grass to stay clean. Getting clean water was another daily struggle. In the harsh, dry environment of the Old West, even though water was essential, the outhouses themselves, though necessary, sometimes ended up contaminating nearby water sources, often without people realizing it. The situation was tough, with puddles of stagnant water scattered all over the place, quickly becoming perfect breeding grounds for flies and other insects. These, in turn, spread filth and waste through the air. Even the cisterns, designed to collect rainwater, ended up getting contaminated with dust and debris that would pile up. Because of this, people had to adapt their daily habits to keep the water as clean as possible. On top of these challenges, it was common for families to share a single bathtub of water for bathing, which happened only once a week if they were lucky. Soap, when available, was a basic mixture of animal fat and plant extracts. Frank Clifford, who also went by the names John Minim Whiteman and John Francis Wallace, shares these experiences in his memoirs about life in the American West. Clifford, an acquaintance of Billy the Kid, shared some interesting personal hygiene practices of Mexican women. They used the root of a plant called soapweed, which is a type of yucca, to wash their hair. Inspired by this natural technique, Clifford tried the soapweed himself and was impressed with the results. His hair was soft, clean, and had a noticeable shine after each wash. Even though some people adopted the use of soapweed, many pioneers in the settlements preferred to make their own soap using animal fat, which also served as a material for candles. However, this homemade soap was pretty harsh and could irritate the skin. Back then, the idea of hygiene was very different from today. Body odor was seen as something natural and unavoidable. Many people believed that washing too much could open up the pores to germs and disease, which led to a widespread reluctance to bathe frequently, reflecting a very practical and basic view of personal cleanliness. At the height of the Old West, saloons were lively places full of social interaction. Without bar stools, Patrons would lean on footrails installed at the base of the bar, which also doubled as a spot for spittoons. On the top edge of the bar, in addition to more spittoons, there were hooks or rails for holding towels. These towels, used repeatedly by customers to wipe beer foam from their lips, were a common way germs and diseases spread because they were shared by everyone. Spitting on the floor was such a deeply ingrained habit that it eventually led to restrictions. Men chewed tobacco and spat on the floor, which was often covered with sawdust to soak up the moisture. However, this practice contributed to the spread of serious respiratory diseases like pneumonia and tuberculosis among saloongoers, leading to the need for better hygiene practices in drinking establishments of that time. In Old West saloons, the sawdust spread across the floor wasn't just a practical way to keep things clean. It also became a breeding ground for germs. In some cases, these places would even rent out floor space to travelers, who slept surrounded by all the accumulated dirt. As the spitting problem got worse, several attempts were made to control it. In some areas, strict bans were put in place, even extending to train platforms and stations, where spitting could result in fines up to $600, a year in jail, or both. The dusty environment of the Old West only made things worse, with dust storms and strong winds kicking up clouds of dirt that got into everything, from homes to cattle pens, affecting both people and animals. Sarah Atherton, along with her husband Jed and their kids, was traveling through the deserts of the American West, facing the hardships described in the book Daily Life on the 19th Century American Frontier by Mary Ellen Jones. As the sun was setting, Sarah felt her eyes burning intensely from the heat and bright light. Dust covered everything around them, and the hat she wore barely did anything to protect her from the harsh rays of the sun. Back then, having bad teeth was pretty common. Without toothbrushes, toothpaste, or dental floss, dental problems were often solved in a drastic way, by pulling the teeth. Without access to modern dentistry, it was common to turn to barbers and blacksmiths, who used basic tools like pliers to pull out the troublesome teeth. When it came to easing the pain of this procedure, there weren't any specific medicines. A shot of whiskey was about all that was offered to dull the pain, even though there were other methods that could have prevented the need to pull teeth in the first place. Still, most people back then didn't really pay much attention to oral hygiene. In the Old West, hygiene left a lot to be desired. And believe it or not, it was common for people to share a single toothbrush at stagecoach stops or places where lots of folks gathered. To get rid of leftover food, it wasn't unusual to use knives. This kind of practice made the chances of catching diseases like cholera much higher, a constant fear for both migrants and native populations. That era was also marked by the lack of proper ways to wash clothes and poor water and sewage systems. The same water used for drinking, cooking, and washing was often reused, which helped spread diseases in camps and settlements. The Mormons, for instance, during their 19th century migration, were hit hard by cholera, which they saw as divine punishment. As devastating as cholera was, it wasn't as deadly as smallpox for Native Americans. Staying healthy was considered a blessing, as noted by Sarah Raymond Herndon, who was amazed by how healthy her group was. There is no sickness in camp. It's wonderful how well we are. I hope it stays this way. Sadly, the lack of hygiene and the use of contaminated water continued to claim many lives. In the Old West, life was tough, and hygiene often left a lot to be desired, especially among men. Cowboys and soldiers, always involved in exhausting activities and long journeys, rarely found time or had the means to bathe. During the summer, even an occasional dip in a stream was a luxury, and in winter, the chance of taking a bath was practically non-existent. On the other hand, women, despite the limitations and lack of privacy, made an effort to maintain some level of cleanliness. It was common to see them every morning heading to a spring or stream, not just to wash their face, but also to drink fresh water. This daily routine, along with their constant attention to keeping their clothes clean, generally meant they maintained a higher level of hygiene than the men. Women's diligence regarding personal hygiene stood out notably during that time of scarce resources. Soldiers and cowboys, often limited to just one set of clothes, rarely had the chance to wash them, only using rivers and streams sporadically for this purpose. Culture also shaped cleaning habits. In 2005, archaeologists discovered a pair of tweezers in Deadwood, an artifact that highlighted the significant presence of the Chinese community in the area. The Chinese, known for not shaving, preferred to remove hair with tweezers, a method they also used while consuming opium. This discovery made by Don Ivy suggested hygiene practices that were common at the time, including the use of tweezers for women's personal care, reflecting the unique customs of that community. Additionally, it wasn't uncommon for some men in the region to sport long, distinct hair, marking their identity and style. At the height of the Old West, legendary figures like Wild Bill Hickok and George Armstrong Custer were known not just for their deeds, but also for their distinct appearances, often sporting long, well-kept hair. Custer, for instance, was famous for using cinnamon oil, which made his hair not only shiny but also fragrant. As the years went on, though, these Western icons indulged in a little luxury whenever they could. After long stretches on the road, nothing felt better than a fresh haircut, a clean shave, a hot bath, and some fresh clothes. These moments were often enhanced with scented hair tonics, adding a special touch to the experience. By the turn of the century, men's fashion took a new direction, and long hair became a thing of the past. Men started going for shorter cuts, a trend seen as a rejection of the pre-Civil War aesthetic norms. If you enjoyed these Old West fun facts, don't forget to like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future content. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.